this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, authorities confirmed that all 150 people on board a Germanwings plane that crashed in the Alps are dead. Recovery operations are set to resume when day breaks. Korea's per capita income exceeds $28,000 in 2014, jumping nearly 8% from a year earlier, but the spike was mainly due to the strengthening Korean won. Plus, Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Martin Demspey, who visits Seoul this week, says progress is being made in setting up an integrated air and missile defense umbrella in the Asia-Pacific region. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Wednesday, March 25th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon. Authorities in Europe say they cannot see how any of the 150 people on board a Germanwings Airbus A320 could have survived Tuesday's crash in southern France.
Search and recovery operations have been halted until daybreak, but one of the jet's black boxes was retrieved before darkness fell. Kwon-soo reports.
Surveying the scene for a moment told the authorities all they needed to know. There is next to no chance anyone survived this plane crash in a remote part of the French Alps. With all 150 people on board the Germanwings Airbus A320 presumed dead, officials say the priority is to return as many victims' bodies as possible, identify them, and find out what caused the accident. One of the plane's black box recorders has been found in the mountains amid the debris. The jet was headed to the German city of Düsseldorf from Barcelona when it plunged from the sky midway through the flight.
I was doing some odd jobs behind my house when I saw a plane passing by. I said, it's a bit low. I saw the plane at a low altitude for 2 or 3 seconds, and as soon as I saw that, I sensed it was going to crash.
Aviation experts say it's a rare incident as the crash happened in the middle of the cruise phase, which is generally considered the safest part of a flight. The majority of air accidents happen during takeoff or landing. Germanwings is a subsidiary of Germany's flagship airline Lufthansa, deemed one of the safest in the world.
It's the first time in our 60-year history that we have lost a plane in flight, and we still have to digest that. The most important thing now is to be with those who lost people today in our thoughts.
The nationalities of those on board are still being confirmed, but officials say most came from Spain and Germany, and many were from Düsseldorf, including 16 teenagers. German media reports that a number of Germanwings flights have been cancelled after the accident, as crew members have been refusing to fly. Reports have suggested that staff were concerned about a repair that was performed on the plane the day before it crashed. But the airline insists the repair to the nose-wheel landing doors was not safety-related. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is scheduled to travel to the crash site on Wednesday local time. She said the crash had left Germany, France, and Spain in a state of deep mourning. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's foreign ministry says there are no confirmed Korean passengers on the Germanwings flight so far. The ministry said it's continuing to reach out to its embassies in the region to check if there are any Korean victims. But it added that considering various factors, including the route of the German airline, it's unlikely that there were Korean nationals on board. The budget airline operated by Lufthansa crashed into a mountainside in the French Alps on Tuesday while traveling from Barcelona to Düsseldorf. All 150 people on board have been confirmed killed. The United States is pushing to strengthen its trilateral cooperation with South Korea and Japan in terms of missile defense. This, says Martin Demspey, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, is set to arrive in Seoul on Thursday after wrapping up his stay in Tokyo. There's speculation he'll want to talk about the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system to the Korean Peninsula during his stop here. Connie Kim reports.
Building an integrated air and missile defense system will definitely top the agenda. Embarking on his trip to Korea and Japan on Tuesday, General Martin Demspey said the U.S. is making progress with Seoul and Tokyo. The general says they've made procurement commitments to make an umbrella defense system more interoperable. Demspey did not elaborate further, but his trip is seen as a push for three-way missile defense cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The biggest question is whether or not the talks will cover the deployment of THAAD, an advanced U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula. Earlier this week, a senior U.S. official indicated that THAAD would be on the agenda when Demspey meets his counterpart, Choi Yoon-hee, on Friday. Seoul, however, dismissed speculations, saying it's not on its official agenda. The American missile defense system is highly controversial. Washington says the deployment of THAAD on Korean soil is crucial for regional peace, while other nations, namely China and Russia, have expressed strong objections. Other topics up for discussion are the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul, response options against North Korea's provocations, and Seoul-Washington joint military exercises. While Pyongyang insists the exercises are a practice of war, Demspey emphasized that the drills are important to ensure deterrence against Pyongyang. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Russia has expressed concern about the possible deployment of a controversial U.S. missile defense system to South Korea, calling on Seoul to carefully assess the positive and negative repercussions. In a statement, Russia's foreign ministry said Tuesday that the THAAD deployment to the peninsula could complicate nuclear talks with North Korea and spark an arms race in Northeast Asia. The ministry added that it, quote, cannot help but be concerned considering the destructive nature of the missile defense system's impact on international security and strategic stability. The U.S. says that will enhance Seoul's ability to deter Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile threats, as well as enhancing surveillance on the north.
South Korea is preparing to mark the 5th anniversary of North Korea's torpedo attack on a South Korean warship. This will happen on Thursday. But for the victims, for the families of the victims, the clock stopped the day their sons lost their lives in the cold sea. Our Eoh Jin-joo tells us more.
Every year when spring is just around the corner, Park Byung-yu can't help but tear up. His son Park Seok-won was one of the 46 South Korean sailors killed on March 26, 2010, when North Korea torpedoed the South Korean warship Cheonan. It was just last year that he was able to start storing away his son's keepsakes. Park has tried hard to move on, comforting himself that his son had given his life for the country. But whenever he hears fabricated stories about why the Cheonan sank, he becomes heartsick.
North Korea keeps saying that it had nothing to do with the attack. But when will we be able to stop sitting and listening to their nonsense?
Like many families of the victims, Park wants the South Korean government to step up efforts to prevent further North Korean provocations.
What happened 5 years ago must not be forgotten, nor should it be distorted. The South Korean government must make sure that something like the Cheonan sinking doesn't happen again by making North Korea take responsibility for what it did. If North Korea does something like this again, the ones being sacrificed are going to be our country's young soldiers.
Thursday will be a sober anniversary for people here in Korea. Thousands of people are expected to attend a memorial ceremony at Daejeon National Cemetery to remember the 46 who lost their lives serving their country. Lee Jun, Arirang News.
North Korea has accused the United States of fabricating a story about the sinking of that South Korean warship Cheonan in an attempt to expand America's influence in Northeast Asia. Now, this statement was issued by the North's military unit at the truce village of Panmunjom, charging Washington with making up the story. The, quote, indictment added that the incident was, quote, orchestrated by the U.S. out of its intention to maintain control of South Korea and Japan. Now, this accusation comes just a day, as we heard in that report there, ahead of the 5th anniversary of the sinking of the Cheonan, which claimed the lives of 46 young South Korean sailors. An international probe did conclude that the vessel was hit by a torpedo from a North Korean submarine, but Pyongyang denies any involvement in the sinking. Korea is urging Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to show genuine remorse for Japan's historical wrongdoings if he ends up giving a planned speech to the US Congress. Seoul's foreign ministry says the Abe administration is probably aware of the attention and concern shared by Korea and the international community over its understanding of history. The ministry added that should Abe address Congress, he should inherit the historical understanding of his predecessors and call on Japan to sincerely reflect upon its wartime atrocities. Abe is scheduled to make a week-long visit to the US at the end of April.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Korea's economic growth last year marked a slight improvement from 2013 on the back of a continued rise in private spending and exports. The gross national income per capita also jumped to over $28,000, but the numbers don't tell the entire story. Analysts say the increase was mainly due to the strengthening Korean won. Hwang Jie has the details.
The Bank of Korea says the domestic economy expanded 3.3% last year. That is 0.4 percentage points higher than the previous year. The central bank attributes the growth in 2014 to a rebound in facilities investments and a steady increase in consumption and exports despite a drop in construction investments. Output in the construction sector grew by a mere 0.6% last year, while that of manufacturing went up by 4% and service by over 3%. By quarter, however, the Korean economy is on a downward spiral. The on-quarter growth, which stood at over 1% in the first quarter, slowed to 0.5% in the second quarter. It then marked a slight pickup in the third quarter to 0.8%, but soon sank to 0.3% in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter growth also marked the slowest pace of growth since the first quarter of 2009, when the country was hit by the global financial crisis. Korea's gross national income per capita last year jumped around 7.5% from a year ago to over $28,000. But the rise is also attributed to the strong Korean won trend rather than an actual increase in the country's purchasing power. The central bank says the local currency strengthened by nearly 4% against the greenback on an annual basis. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
In an attempt to tackle the nation's snowballing household debt, the government has introduced a new program allowing mortgage borrowers to switch to low fixed-rate loans. Yesterday was the first day local banks took applications for the program, and the demand was so strong it already exceeded $4.5 billion, the amount allocated for the month of March alone. Shin Se-min has more.
The so-called relief loans introduced by the Financial Services Commission Tuesday drew a large number of applicants to local banks. In just a day, a total of some 4 trillion won, or $3.6 billion worth of mortgages were transferred by about 20,000 applicants who were trying to manage their household debt by switching to a low fixed-rate mortgage. The interest rate of the new mortgage falls between 2.5 to 2.7%. The massive shift to the government-initiated mortgage program showed that many Koreans are struggling to restructure their household debt amid the protracted sluggish economy, a matter that's been dubbed a time bomb for the Korean economy by policymakers. Korea's total household debt exceeded the 1,000 trillion won mark, or $950 billion, for the first time in the third quarter of last year. The government has been making efforts to escape the economic doldrums by taking measures to revive sluggish consumption and rein in household debt by encouraging companies to raise salaries. The central bank cut Korea's interest rate to a historic low of 1.75% early this month, and Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan announced a stimulus package plan last August, which included easing the debt-to-income mortgage loans. With the new mortgages, however, the Commission is hopeful that the new loans will place household debt under control as they allow debtors to steadily pay back loans over a long period of time. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
A total of 130 state-run companies will hire 3,000 rookies without considering their educational or professional background that in Korea often include qualifications unrelated to the job. Instead, they are opting to adopt a new government-led employment system, which will be fully implemented by public enterprises by 2019. Sun Jung-in has more.
Yang Jae-hoon was hired at the Korea Cadastral Survey Corporation last June after 2 failed trials. His 2 years of working in the company's internship program and 3 job-related licenses were not enough to get the job because of his low English scores. But after the company adopted the employment system introduced by the government, his efforts were finally rewarded.
At that time, I had to take a test on common knowledge and English and not so much on my related major. It may have been an easy test for some, but I had to go through a difficult time back then.
The National Competency Standards divides categories for more than 800 jobs and specifies how much skill and knowledge is required to work in that field. It also provides a standard to evaluate the competency of the applicants. With the adoption of the system, job applicants will no longer need to worry about building up general qualifications such as high TOEIC scores that are unrelated to the job they want. And for companies, it helps them hire rookies based on their competency.
The employees that we hired based on the NCS were well prepared to be put in the field right away, and they carried out the job well.
The government plans to gradually expand the NCS system to reach all the state-run enterprises by 2019. Among some 300 public companies in Korea, 130 of them, including KEPCO and National Health Service, aims to hire 3,000 rookies based on the system this year. Experts point out that if they don't want this system to become another mere requirement for job seekers, schools and universities should focus their education on practical vocational skills. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, Samsung Electronics is cozying up with Microsoft, seemingly putting their past legal disputes behind them. The 2 tech heavyweights have forged a deal that will pre-install Microsoft services on Samsung's Android-based mobile devices. Won Ji-hyun reports.
Samsung Electronics plans to have Microsoft services and applications pre-installed onto its portfolio of smartphones and tablets starting the first half of this year. Samsung's new Galaxy S6 smartphones will be equipped with note-taking application OneNote, OneDrive data storage, and video chat application Skype. They will also come with an additional 100 gigabytes of free cloud storage for 2 years through Microsoft OneDrive. Microsoft's flagship software programs, Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, will also be pre-installed on Samsung Android tablets. Users that purchase Android devices through Samsung's business-to-business sales channels will be able to purchase one of 3 versions of Office 365, Business, Business Premium, or Enterprise that come along with Samsung's Knox security solution. Samsung says its goal is to meet the ever-evolving needs of both consumers and business customers and give them more power to discover new mobile experiences. The Korean firm adds that its latest partnership will offer users the mobility they need in their personal and business lives. Some analysts see the move as a blow to Google, as Microsoft's apps could eventually replace the Google software that's already loaded on Samsung devices. Won Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Korea's ICT and industry ministries have unveiled plans to invest more than $5 billion into new growth engines as part of the government's creative economy drive. One up-and-coming area that's of particular interest is the commercial drone market. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
Korea wants to boost its presence in the global market for unmanned aerial vehicles.
After the U.S., it was the second country to succeed in developing tilt rotors, which allows for vertical takeoffs and landings for aircraft. Even though it currently ranks 6th in the world in terms of drone technology, domestic regulations have been holding it back from gaining commercial footing, but that's about to change.
Korea's been behind because there was a lack of demand, but with the introduction of drones in the private sector, we see great potential for growth. We are coming up with new eased regulations to spur the market.
This is just one of the industries that is being eyed as a potential future cash cow. The government plans to invest over $5 billion by 2020 on 19 future growth engines, including the robot and smart car industries, as part of its creative economy drive.
We plan to increase investment for R&D, ease up regulations that are hindering growth, and create sophisticated management systems to help new tech industries become the pillars of economic revitalization.
The plan includes other burgeoning sectors like the Internet of Things and fifth-generation networks and is expected to be finalized in April after a review by governmental bodies and experts in the private sector. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Wednesday at lunchtime in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim at the News Center.
Eunice, U.S. President Barack Obama has announced that the U.S. will maintain its current troop levels in Afghanistan until the end of this year.
That's right, Jin-joo. That would slow the nearly 50% pullback the White House had planned before from the current 9,800 troops. This announcement coming after a meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani at the White House. But President Obama said the U.S. would stay on track for a complete pullout by 2017. He explained the move was meant to ensure that everything is done to help Afghan security forces struggling to protect what he called a still dangerous country. A tough spring fighting season is also anticipated to fend off Islamic State fighters. President Ashraf Ghani, who was elected amid hotly contested results 6 months ago, thanked Americans for standing shoulder to shoulder with Afghanistan. His visit is being viewed as a turning point in Washington-Kabul relations to one that's more cooperative than when his predecessor Hamid Karzai was in power. The United Nations has moved to extend full spousal benefits to gay employees who are legally married, regardless of whether or not gay marriage is recognized in their country of origin. The move had been introduced by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in June, which offered same-sex couples with benefits that were already given to their heterosexual counterparts, such as pension entitlements and travel allowances. 80 countries at the UN General Assembly Budget Committee voted against Russia's bid to block this new measure. Russia, which does not recognize gay marriage, had argued that the changes would infringe upon a state's sovereignty under the pretext of respecting human rights. And finally, American actress Angelina Jolie has revealed she had her ovaries and fallopian tubes removed to avoid an inherited risk of ovarian cancer. She made the disclosure in an op-ed for the New York Times after writing about her choice to have a preventive double mastectomy 2 years ago. Jolie said she underwent the knife last week after doctors had detected early signs of cancer. The Oscar-winning star's mother, grandmother, and aunt had all died from cancer. The 39-year-old, who was raising a family with fellow actor Brad Pitt, said she was going public with her decision to raise awareness of options available for women who find themselves in a similar position.
Good afternoon. The morning started out chilly, but it's getting warmer with the days high above average. But that means big temperature gaps between day and night, so make sure you dress accordingly. Clear spells and good air quality will continue all day long, so head out and enjoy the nice spring sunshine this afternoon. But unfortunately, the air is getting drier every day. The dry weather warning is still in place here in the capital, and the humidity level could go down to as low as mid-teens by by midday, and that's about 30% lower than the average indoor humidity. So stay hydrated by drinking plenty of water. And here are the readings for today. Seoul and Busan will top out at 14, while Daegu and Gwangju rise to 15 and 16 respectively. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 13 and 15, while Dokdo tops out at 9. Now we'll get milder from now on, but there's a chance of light rain on Sunday morning. Well, that's all for the weather. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, Jen, for the weather update. And that does it for this edition of Newsline at Noon.
Yes, Jin-joo and I will be back at the same time on Thursday. So until then, goodbye.